I did.
Okay, so we are live.
Hello.
Hello. Man, I was sitting there like, okay, like, am I going to bumble this up? Meanwhile, I'm setting this up and I'm listening to our previous podcast, and I'm like tripping out because it's, I thought it was 2019. It was 2018.
I know.
Yeah, wow. I was like, dang, wow. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the OMG podcast, and I have a returning guest, my only guest, and this time I will allow you to introduce yourself, and we are speaking with...
Hi, guys. My name is Amelia Nemeth. I'm a Connecticut-based actor, singer, dancer, sales and marketing extraordinaire.
So, how are things going in this crazy, crazy world?
Oh, it's so weird. I mean, it's crazy. So I moved out of the city in 2018, like I think October of that year, and then I was kind of figuring out adjusting back to my home state, adjusting back to like living at my parents' house for a little while, which was kind of weird, and then finally kind of got my groove where I found like a couple local theater groups here up in CT, and so we were doing shows, and I was literally doing back-to-back shows for a year, which was great. And then I finally found an apartment that I liked, and I moved out of my parents' house, which was much needed because, being at 33 and living at home was like driving me crazy. And then I moved out in February of 2020, and then the whole world shuts down like less than a month later.
Wow. Holy crap.
I know.
Wow. And what's weird is, like, it's almost a year.
I know. We're coming up on a year. It's like COVID's anniversary. It's like, nope, you're not allowed to say that.
I think it's like March 16th or something like that.
Yeah, sometime around then. Maybe like the 12th or 16th. It's either like the 12th, between like the 12th and 16th, and it was so crazy because I had a show. So I had done City of Angels with this theater called the Arts at Angel Orias, and then I had done Tarzan at this theater called Squarefoot Theater Company, and Arts at Angel Orias is in Southington, where it's actually where I live now, in Southington, Connecticut, and then Squarefoot's in Wallingford, and then I did a couple more shows. So I did She Loves Me in December of 2019, and then I did Pippin in February of 2020. Literally, like, we closed on the 29th of February. And then we were literally starting rehearsals for the next show that I was supposed to be in. It was Mamma Mia. I got Tanya in Mamma Mia. And literally we had one rehearsal as in the whole world shut down. It's crazy.
Wow. So I'm like envisioning, you going through this. Like, were there a slew of email chains between you and the other actors, like trying to like figure out, like, all right, we know they were in lockdown, okay, maybe, we're gonna, try to reschedule something and see what's happening, or was everything just done by phone, or was just everything just shut down and it's like, all right, guys, we're just going to put a pause on this?
Well, what happened was we had a wonderful production staff, and our director and our producer and our stage manager were very much in contact with us, and they were very open and honest with us about what was going on, and everyone's kind of, living in this open-ended, like, we don't know what's going on, we don't know when we're going to be able to get back to it, but, like, until then, keep learning your lines, keep working on these things, and then probably about a month into the pandemic, when we realized it wasn't just going to be, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, whatever they said, they made the call to postpone it, but they weren't sure when, and they were hoping they could maybe do it later in the summer. And they were being very open and honest with us about it. It wasn't any problem. We completely understood. Obviously, like, no one's gonna want to go sit in a 100-seat theater right now with people they don't know. It's gonna be, that's the reality of our world currently. And so after a couple months went by and we still weren't able or allowed to rehearse, they decided, you know what, we're just going to postpone it until next year, because it was supposed to be in June of 2020. So then it was supposed to be pushed back to June of 2021. But now the restrictions have been modified, and so we actually had to do it. We're going to be doing it, hopefully putting it up in August of this year, which is still, I mean, it's better than not having something to look forward to, and I'm very thankful that we're still trying to put it up. The interesting thing about that is we were going to try to postpone it for another year. The theater space is kind of outdoors, so it has to be, you know, a decent weather. It's not heated because it's an outdoor venue, so like we can't do that kind of stuff in the winter. So what's crazy is the national tour of Mamma Mia is going out next year, I believe, in 2022 or 2021. I'm not actually sure, but the rights to all of the regional theater productions are being taken away after this year. So we have to do it this year, because they were like, oh, well, let's just postpone it one more year. And I believe it's MTI, but I'm not actually sure. They were saying, well, you won't be able to if you don't do it this year, because the rights are no longer going to be available.
Because they don't want anyone else to compete, I guess.
Yeah, it's all legal mumbo jumbo, and who knows, but it's crazy, right?
What this sounds like, just basically what I'm envisioning, because you're saying outdoors. Has anyone been on the staff been like paying attention to what like something like what Dave Chappelle is doing? Because currently, you know, I think he lives in Virginia, and they're doing like a comedy sets in Virginia outdoors. So like he has like, let's say like this, the stage is kind of like this gazebo type of vibe, and then, you know, people are spaced out. So, you know, in his town, like he's inviting, like, let's say Chris Rock and Joe Rogan and a couple of other like well-known comedians, and they'll come up and do a set, you know, and it's like a revolving tour with revolving people, but it's outdoors.
Okay.
So I was asking, like, is anyone like, you know, studying the landscape of like, all right, this is how we can do this and pull this off?
I don't believe we're allowed to start rehearsing yet, because it's going to be, you know, it's a large cast. So, because Mamma Mia is a big show, there's probably going to be like, you know, 10 ensemble members. There's Donna and the Dynamos, so that's 3 people, and then there's the 3 dads, so that's 6 people plus Sophie, which is 7, and Sky is 8. So like, there's at least going to be probably between 18 to 28 people on stage, and then there's going to be, you know, a pit. So there's going to be the keyboard, the guitar, the piano, the keyboard, the guitar, the bass, the drums. Like, I just don't see that being able to happen. And on top of it, it is going to be warmer, but you also have to remember that Connecticut is an hour and a half north of, well, at least where I am in Connecticut, is an hour and a half north of the city. And so it stays colder here longer. You know what I mean? So, like, the problem with that is, you know, not that we couldn't do it if we were allowed to rehearse and it was like with regulations and et cetera, but the problem is no one's going to go outside to see a show in March. No one's going to want to sit through a 2-hour musical in the freezing cold. You know, and I did misrepresent the theater space. It is technically indoors, but because the space is like, it's a barn, we will have the like the larger doors open during the performances, just because then it's a bit more COVID friendly with airflow. But like, it's not heated, and it's not super well insulated, and it's also not like cooled. We were talking with the producer yesterday, a couple of us actors in it, and she's thinking about buying, you know, like mini air conditioners to put around, because if we're doing the show in August versus, you know, doing it in June when we were initially planning on doing it, it's going to be a lot hotter. And, you know, people, the same thing with it being too cold here is that people aren't going to want to sit out in the blazing hot, you know, in the heat, So it's not, I mean, like I said, I don't think it's going to be a big problem. I think trying to do it sooner would only be a problem because it would take a while to put that show together, because there's a lot of like set changes and costume changes and a lot of numbers and a lot of choreography. And like when I say like we had one rehearsal and then we got shut down, I mean like we did a read through and then we got shut down. So like we're not there yet. Like it's not like we were ready to go and then got shut down, which would have been even more frustrating, quite frankly, because if you put all that work in and then you have to wait a year to do the show, that's such a bummer.
So has another play been put on the table, like, hey, maybe as a plan B?
Not with this particular group. The thing is, like, there's so many theaters, and I'm sure everyone's dealing with this around the country right now. There's so many theaters that had already paid rights for all of these productions that they still have yet to do. One of the other theater companies that I know and have worked with closely, they have like 6 shows that they haven't gotten to put up. So I don't think they want to invest in getting rights for other shows when they already have plans for these shows. You know what I mean? And this is just me speculating. I have no idea, because like I'm not the producer, I'm not the person in charge, but it's something that I'm thinking. Like, I know that there are a lot of places that just had their entire seasons canceled or entire seasons postponed, and if they pay for the rights, they want to get their money's worth of paying for those rights, because they can be very expensive. You know what I mean?
Wow, you're showing me like a whole other side, because I don't know so much. I mean, I did at one point work in the theater, but not to this extent where like things got canceled and stuff like that. So this is like crazy. So I mean, I guess this kind of gives me a flickering of like how Broadway just like shut down.
Right.
Imagine all of those plays.
I'm sorry, you can continue.
Oh, no, that was it. Just the fact that, you have all these, plays and everything's lined up, and then it's just like, okay, this is where we're at, and then we're shut down. And because I thought I read something that they weren't thinking about coming back this year, unless I read this last year. Like, they weren't in any rush in Broadway.
Yeah, the problem with Broadway, and I have a couple people in my friend groups and my professional theater groups that are on Broadway, whether or not they're performers or they're on the technical side of the theater, and they, they're all kind of just waiting in limbo, and a lot of them have had to get, subsistence jobs. Like one of my friends, he's one of the sound mixers for the new musical Diana. And he's working literally like at a retail store, because you can make a decent amount of money off of unemployment, but it's not going to be enough to pay. It's not going to compare to making a Broadway salary. And doing 8 shows a week. And so, like, he's working in retail. I know some people who've left the city indefinitely and are waiting to come back, or, moved home, like, gave up their apartments, that kind of stuff. And the problem with Broadway is that the theaters are so big. It's hard to, produce the show at 25% capacity, because it's just not going to create any revenue that's going to be able to pay everyone. And this is what I think, and maybe I'm just speculating here. But it's hard to. The cost analysis of that just doesn't make sense. It's like, why are we going to do a 25% house and make not even enough money to turn on the lights, et cetera, et cetera. Like, and that's just an example that I'm making up. I'm not saying I have any statistics about that. But so a lot of things with Broadway, it's hard. And then on top of it, even if they were allowed to do the shows, Broadway, most of the people who go see Broadway shows are tourists, and no one's traveling right now. So even if they were allowed to have the 100% capacity, or even 50% or 75%, they're not going to make enough money, because the people who are their main customer base are no longer coming to the city. You know what I mean? So it's it's an interesting world. And when I remember, when the shutdowns first started, and they finally decided that, like, okay, it's time Broadway should shut its doors. And, they thought that maybe by the summer it might be better. It's kind of how everyone, like, thought. We were all positive and hopeful and very much like wanting and willing to come back to work, but unfortunately it just kept on getting delayed. And so initially they were saying, fall of 2020, and then they were saying, no, maybe like January of 2021 or something like that. And now I think that maybe the last I read, and it could have changed now because I feel like every day is a new day and we never know what to expect. But it's like, it might be May now, but at the same time, who knows what's going to happen between now and May. And I think that now that the vaccine is rolling out, it's going to be a little bit easier for people to justify being able to open these kind of industries and businesses. But I feel like until everyone's kind of vaccinated and immune, or et cetera, everyone's safe, I don't know when these industries are going to go back, And the thing that's even crazier is that, like, there's not all the shows, not all the Broadway shows are going to open at once. They're probably gonna open the big sellers like Phantom and I don't know, like Lion King, like the ones that are always doing well, and they'll probably open those first, and then the people who are doing like the newer shows that maybe don't have as much of a following, or they don't know how they're going to sell because they haven't even opened, like they might be waiting a couple more months to open. Like, for instance, Diana, the show that my friend is on, they're not sure when they're opening again, and they had literally hadn't even had their opening yet on Broadway. They were in previews when they got shut down by COVID. Which is, I mean, apparently it actually like helped them, because then they could go back and do even more work on making it a better show, and they're
tighter.
And they actually got to do a filming for it for Netflix, which is kind of interesting because the show hasn't even opened yet, and it's going to be available on Netflix before it ever opens on Broadway, which is really cool. But it's with the success of Hamilton on Disney Plus, and everyone kind of being starved for any type of show or seeing any type of art, and so it's interesting to be able to sit in your living room in the middle of nowhere and watch a Broadway show.
I kind of equate that to watching sports now,
Yeah.
And I've gotten so used to it, that, I hear people complain, it's just different without the crowd. I'm like, to me, it's the same thing. I mean, the crowd, they do bring an energy, but, it's, to me, this, I'm more focusing on watching, the play.
And like being on your couch, one, you're comfortable, you're not like sitting out in the freezing cold, especially like with football and that kind of stuff. And two, it's like you almost get a better view sitting at home with the multiple camera angles than one of the seats that you'd get. Like, I mean, I even used to go to Madison Square Garden all the time and watch basketball, either college or NBA. I almost said NFL, and I was like, that's not right. NBA.
Yeah,
and even then, even with the big screen above you and everything, it is different, and I'm interested to see how that's going to shape our industry. Not necessarily with filmmaking, because I mean they're already back to work, and they're already having Mrs. Maisel, I know for a fact, is already back shooting and stuff like that. So that's cool. But with theater, it's like, are people going to still want to go to the theater, or like are we going to be like streaming our performances now?
The funny thing is that for years, I always wondered. For years, I always kept saying, how come they just don't take these plays and put them on a pay-per-view, like when they used to have pay-per-view, just now, just can't. I just always, it's just never, I'm like, how come they do? And then it was a time where, they were talking about, Broadway is suffering, before all this, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, no one's coming out, and I was like, well, how come you're not putting this, where people can watch this at home, that's still going to encourage them to maybe come out? So, I guess this is going to force them to do it, to like how they carry this out. I'm thinking, as you were describing the whole thing, I'm just envisioning, in my mind, I'm like, do you remember when 9/11 happened?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Saturday Night Live was like the first show to go out live, and I think at that point in time, Giuliani had just taken office as the mayor here. And,
Yeah.
it was like this big thing, and it was like, oh, we're back. So I just envisioned, like, who are they going to get? And the first person I'm thinking of is like somebody like Tom Hanks. Just to do a, how like they do the Thanksgiving Day parade.
Yeah.
I think a good idea would be to do something like that when it gets warmer. Because like you said, they're not going to all roll out at the same time. So you pick, let's just say, all right, what's out right now? All right, so you're saying Diana. I've never heard. Is that about Princess Diana?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so let's say they did that, and then you got, and I'm just going to throw a name out. Let's say you couldn't get Tom Hanks. You got Meghan Markle, since they're back in the States.
Right.
And they do this huge introduction, yada, yada, yada. The pre-show is going to have Mariah Carey and, Kelly Clarkson and da-da-da-da-da to lead up to it, to, do this build-up, like for 30 minutes or so, and then you just have the play. And let's just say they did it, on Herald Square, just this one time, just to let you know, and then you had a banner on the, while you're watching it on your TVs, tickets on sale now, we're back,
Right.
That's just kind of like what I'm envisioning, and then it would just like let people know, because you're not coming back at, let's say the tickets were like $100. That's not happening. I don't see that happening.
No.
No way soon.
No one wants to spend that anymore.
Yeah, so you're going to have to, come in at a very low rate, even if it's like, a package deal, dinner and a movie, such and such and such, because that's going to also help the restaurant business.
I know.
This is just, just me just freestyling off, what you're giving me. It's more interesting hearing from you about the theater perspective, because I never thought about the theater perspective despite hearing that Broadway shut down.
Right.
So having someone tell me about that perspective, it's like, wow, because I've just been so focused on film and film and television.
Of course.
Because I just thought like it would just shut down and boom. So this is just very interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting that people don't think about it. It's so funny because what I saw this meme, at the beginning of quarantine when everyone was like shut down and everyone was working from home, and it said, if you don't think the arts are important, turn off your TVs, like don't watch Netflix, don't read books, don't listen to music for a day and see how you feel during your quarantine. You know what I mean? Like it's so funny that's immediately where people's energy flocks to when they are stripped of every other outlet, yet we're going to probably be the last industry to recover.
Wow. Somebody's going to come up with something. I think the streaming thing is going to be...
are anything if not adaptable, and so I think that things are going to change, and I think it's going to change the way we even audition. As it already has, because I know so many people who are still in the professional game. I'm sort of still in it, but I'm more doing it not as a hobby, but like on top of working a full-time job. And I know people who are full-time performers, and they're already saying like I was like, talking to one of my friends, they're like, yeah, I had to film like 3 self-tapes today and send it because no one's holding auditions and no one's congregating in these large audition spaces and studios. And so it's already changing the landscape of what being a performer is. And I feel like that's just kind of the way it's going to go for a while, and maybe we'll return to the way it was before, or maybe we'll learn from this, and maybe we'll move forward in a way that we use a lot more of the digital scene. Like I know so many people who are already investing, in ring lights and backdrops and ways to make their self-tapes look better, and I think that's great, and I think it's smart. But it's interesting to see if I, whenever I go back to auditioning, whenever the next show is, et cetera, am I going to be auditioning in person? Am I going to send in a video? Am I going to be doing a Zoom audition? Who knows what's going to happen? And I feel like we're not really going to know until we get there. And maybe we already are there because I'm kind of out of the loop a little bit because of the life choices I've made for myself. Maybe we already are.
That sounds so dark when you said that.
I didn't sound that dark.
You see this. this alcoholic, like in a dark alley. Like, these
Oh my
are the
God.
choices I made.
I know, it's like hovering over like my trash can fire, like, whoa, I used to be an actor.
These are the life choices I made.
No, what I mean is, like, I just decided that I wanted to take a break from living paycheck to paycheck, and I found this job opportunity, and that's why one of the reasons I left the city. And people always ask me, they're like, "Are you going to come back? Like, what do you think you're going to do?" And I've been like a free spirit and kind of gone with the flow and saw where the wind took me. I guess I don't know how many different cliches I just fit into a sentence, but apparently I did that. And so it was so funny because I don't know, and it's not that I don't miss performing, but I don't miss New York rent either. You know, and I'm pretty happy where I've landed right now, and maybe I'll get back into it, and who knows, because luckily for me, specifically, like, my type is kind of the maternal figures, those kind of things, and I'm only 34, so not that I couldn't play a young mom, but, like, I'm not going to play those kind of roles for another 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, and you know, I'm fortunate enough in just being my genetics that, like, I do look younger than I actually am. It's so funny because specifically in Connecticut, I look kind of like I'm in probably my late 20s. I don't know. It depends. I'm sure everyone has a different opinion about that, but, like, I'm going to be 35 this year, and, like, people think I'm still in my 20s, and it's cool, but then it means that I have to wait even longer to be able to play these roles, you know? So, like, if I wanted to get back into it, I probably have to wait a little while, and that's another reason that I decided to leave New York, because I was like, why am I going to stay here and, like, literally shit money into all of these expensive apartments and expensive lifestyles and the food and you know, when I could save money and move back home and then get back to it when I come into that part of my life, you know what I mean? I'm not like, when I made life choices, it's like, this is the day I'm going to just walk into traffic. Like, that's not what I meant.
No, just the way that you just said it just sounds
I know,
funny.
like, you're not really dark, and I'm like, that's not what I meant, but oh well.
I'm just visual, you know, when people say things sometimes, and just the way it hits me. But this actually leads into something that I like this. I'll leave this up. No, actually, because this is what I said I was going to do. I said, I want to talk to you about something, but what I'm probably going to do is cut this out, because this is, like, private information, but I didn't want to, like, oh, we're going to talk about it later, and then it's something that never happens.
Right.
So it's like when this airs, this part will be out, which is basically, I just wanted to leave you with that little breadcrumb.
I love it. Anyhow. I actually have something to add to that. If you decide to put it in the podcast, if you don't, that's totally cool. But I was listening to you, and I was thinking about, you know, like, the concept, the visual concept of, like, sitting in a room where, you know, initially maybe when you started in this industry, you would be like, these are my competition, and it's like, now they can be your collaborators, which is even better. But there was, like, I saw this, gosh, I wish I could find the quote. I was actually, like, when you were talking, I was scrolling through, like, my Instagram to see if I could find it, because I saw this on Instagram the other day, and I think I shared it in my story, but those disappear, you know, after, like, 24 hours. And it said something about, like, your competition is no longer anyone else. Like, it's the choices you make. It's the bad food you eat. It's the things that you weren't willing to do. It's like, so change your behavior to fit the things you want and you need, and you're only competing with a past version of yourself.
Yeah,
cool. I'm sorry. I know it's hard when we're like...
No, you go ahead. No,
it's just hard because we're not sitting next to each other, so, like, I don't know when you're about to speak. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's like, it's such a refreshing way to look at any industry and any business. It's like, you know, I'm not competing with this person for a role. Like, I mean, and yeah, sometimes you are. Like, sometimes it does come down to, you know, this is the other person that is up for this role. But at the same time, like, you're only really competing against yourself and your past and the things that you can do. And it's such a nice, positive shift in your mentality about these kind of things, because then it doesn't become about what anyone else is doing, and then it doesn't. I feel like it almost kind of takes a big weight off of your shoulders to not have to worry about what anyone else is doing, because I don't know, maybe this is just because now I'm in my 30s and kind of being a lot more self-assured and a lot more aware of who I am and what I need and what I want, and just the things that are important to me. And it's like, I don't need to worry about these things anymore. And I've gotten to the point where it's like, and not to like curse crazily, but it's like, I don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks about me. Like, either you like me or you don't, and that's fine. And if you have a good reason for not liking me, like, I would probably like to know what it is so I can try to work on whatever it is. But at the same time, like, there are people who are going to love you and there are people who are not. And, if they're not your people, they're not your people. And that's about life and not just the business. But it's really refreshing to walk into an audition space, even pre-pandemic, and just be like, I'm just going to do the best I can do and not worry about what they're thinking about and behind the table. Because, like, you could literally be the best performer, have the greatest audition, but they already know who they want for that part, and it's not you. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with you, So
you hit a nail on the head that I was going to direction, which is the politic game. And the way you cap that is that they already had cast whoever it is, but they have to spend that money and justify it. It's the politics of it. They have to justify that, we try to get especially now with the Academy changing that the rule, that shit. So it's like, we have to justify. We tried to cast a Latino, we tried to cast African American, we tried to cast Indian, we tried to cast someone gay, we tried, and we didn't, but this is who we wanted. And it's like, Chris Evans was already signed months ago, but you have to play that game, or you are the best person and someone else is pulling for you, right? And that person in the casting room is like, she's it, but she doesn't know that the producer is already sleeping with such and such. And it could be
that, like, their agent knew this guy and they promised. Like, it could be the
Yep. You owe me a favor. Yada yada yada. And we're sitting here stressing. I'm not good enough. And then it's like, it sometimes has nothing to do with you.
The best is one of the best things I ever learned from one of my college professors, and from one of my mentors in the city. They were both actually through my like Shenandoah Conservatory family. I think it was Aaron. His name's Aaron Galligan-Sturl. He's a Broadway actor, director. He teaches classes for VP Boyle's music theater classes. I forget what the name exactly is because I haven't gone to them in a while, but maybe it was him who said it. It was either him or like my professor Jonathan Plum who said it, and it's like, the audition that you need to nail is like getting the callback. And if you get the callback, that means that you had a great audition. Getting the role 99.9% of the time, it has nothing to do with you. Like, for instance, I don't think I'm a super tall person, but like, I'm 5'8", and a lot of people in theater are short, or at least the men. Like, I know, for instance, there's the average height for a man in America is 5'9.5", something like that. So specifically, and I mean, movies are different because they can put lifts in people's shoes and they can put people like on different platforms and make it look like they're much taller than me or they're shorter than you. That's not a big deal, but like specifically with theater, I remember every time I'd like walk into an audition room and I kind of scan the holding room and see what everyone was looking like, and that's not necessarily to wage the competition. It was more to see like what they were calling in, and see who they were calling in, specifically with if it's like a romantic role or even like, we're brother and sister, or they want me to look older or younger. It's like, because of my height, it limits some of the things that I can do specifically in musical theater, because they're not going to cast me out as a guy who's 5'9", and then put me in 3-inch Laducas and stand me next to him, and I'm literally I'm like not towering over him, but I'm much taller than him, and it's just kind of stuff like that where it's like, it's such a funny thing where it's sometimes just it boils down to like who you are as a person. And it has nothing to do with how good your audition was or your performance or your talent or anything like that. And it's so funny because we get so wrapped up in what you were saying before, where it's like, God, I'm just not good enough. Like, I can't believe that I didn't do this. And, you know, there are people who, specifically, you know, I've run into in the community theater world in Connecticut, where it's like, there are people who don't audition well. And you know, because this isn't their career, this is something they do for fun, and like, yeah, it happens there. And I mean, we've all been there where we've all had a bad audition, you know, like we walk out and go, crap. And though it's funny, sometimes when I've walked out and been like, that was such a terrible audition, then I'd get the call back. And other times I'd walk out being like, I nailed it, that was so great, and I wouldn't even hear anything. You know, it's so funny that we get so wrapped up on like everything. Like, it's also funny that we're talking about this as opposed to, you know, what we were just talking about, where it's like, yeah, you're only competing with yourself, and you know, it's about all that. But at the same time, like, sometimes you can have the best audition of your life and it doesn't matter because you're either not right for the role, or, you know, you're too tall versus against someone that, or tall or short or whatever, or fat or skinny or whatever, versus the person they already cast and already have, you know, the contract signed with. Or it just could be the fact that, like, you remind them of someone they didn't like in high school and they don't want to be around that energy. You know, it has nothing to do with you.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's so funny.
Point. Yep.
I love talking about, like, the time we met and the audition we had, and it's so funny because I remember you telling me, not that you said my audition was bad, you were just like, you know, it wasn't like your audition that solidified why I wanted to work with you, it was your positivity and your attitude. Like,
exactly.
Because, like, I mean, you were, I think even, and I forget this, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were even replacing someone that had dropped, like we're talking about the flaky actors, like last time we talked, you were replacing someone and I was coming in to replace them, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's so funny because pretty much before we started talking, it was that the last episode I was just listening to, and it was right around that part. And still to this day, because when I was listening, I was like, yeah, I still can't remember what happened with this person.
Yeah.
I just know that they did something flaky. Like, they were supposed to get in contact with me. I think that's what it was. And it was like, you know, it got to a point where, you know, I'm chasing, and this person was doing another play. And I'm like, yeah, come on. Like, all it took was just a callback, kiddo, just to say,
right,
hey, I'm still doing da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, all right, this is, you know, because what that does, if that is, I really do think that that's what it was. It makes me nervous because are you going to be this way when it's time for us to go shoot? Are you just going to just disappear, you know, whatever, or just, you know, you could have just text, hey, this person just disappeared.
Right.
And I was like, all right, they got to go.
Well, and
that's
the part is, like, it's not just about your talent. It's not just about, it's not just about your talent. It's not just about the way that you are in the audition room. It's about being someone, you know, being someone that's dependable. It's a business after all. Like, you know, you're getting hired for a job. Are you going to show up to the job on time? Are you going to be a person that's pleasant to work with? Are you going to cause issues on set? Are you going to, like, you know, it's a lot of that. It's so funny because there's so many people, specifically younger actors who aren't in the business as long, and they get this attitude where it's like, well, I'm great and I'm talented, so, like, I'm gonna work. And it's like, yeah, but, you know, 9 times out of 10 that's not true if you're a person who's difficult to work with. Like, you know, you get a reputation, and the world is so small, and it gets smaller and smaller every day. Like, literally, I posted on someone's Facebook wall today, like, happy birthday, and I found out that this girl I went to high school with went to college with his brother, and I had no idea, and he lives in New Jersey. It's like, the world is so small. Just be kind and gracious to everyone, because you never know who's going to be the reason that you don't get a job because of something you did or something you said, you know. And it's, at the end of the day, I mean, and I'm not, like, saying that is like a be careful, don't be a dick, but it's like, you know, you're going to want to work with people who show up for the extra work, show up. Like, you know, one of the things that's great about one of the theater companies I work for here, it is a community theater technically, but we do, you know, professional level shows, and they're fantastic. But, like, the first show I did with them, I was cast in the ensemble. They didn't know me. I actually was auditioning for them via video because I was in Australia for work during the time of the auditions. So, like, I couldn't even audition in person. So they didn't even get to know who I was or, you know, get a feel for who I am because they didn't even meet me before they cast me. And so I wasn't expecting to get a lead with that, but then, you know, I came in, I knew my shit, I did my work, I came in and I was nice to everyone and didn't cause drama and wasn't being a diva, and like, you know, I wasn't coming in being like, I'm a professional actor, this is just something I'm doing for fun. Like, I say, like, learn how to be humble if you don't know how to be yet. I mean, granted, because if not, the world will humble you and it's not going to be fun. But at the same time, like, you know, I would offer to come and help build the set, and I would come and help, you know, we were literally building a theater from scratch and like putting in chairs and stuff, and it really, you know, it's so funny because since this time, the producer of that theater's kind of become like an aunt to me, or like someone that like I would consider family, and she always talks about it. She's like, you know, it's so telling who has like a good head on their shoulders and who is really good to work with when they're the people who are always going to show up and be there and the people you can count on and depend on. And literally, like, even her daughters said it about us, where it's like, you know, if you needed something, Mom, like, you call Amelia, she'll be there in 10 minutes, you know, like without even questioning what it is. And it's kind of like that. I mean, like, I'm saying this is a little bit different because it's more like a family than it is like a business, but at the same time, you want to be that person that people are like, oh, well, if I need someone like that's talented and dependable, like, you want to be the person they think of, you know, and you don't want to be a person that's difficult to work with. And I went on like a crazy tangent there, and I don't know what that was, but I mean, I think it's still good information.
No. What, as you would, you know, when you, how you transitioned when you were talking about one of your mentors, it kind of, because that all kind of like led into it.
Right.
It made me think about an acting teacher I had. Her name was Yana Brandt. Something that she said, and this is goes into, you know, pretty much, you know, my reasoning for casting you. She said, you know, it's good, fine, and dandy to like want to work with, you know, let's say Dwayne Johnson, right? Let's say you want to work with Dwayne Johnson. That's great, but the reality is, can you stand to be in the same space with Dwayne Johnson for 3 months of filming?
Correct.
And that always stuck with me. So I always like, all right, this person's a good read, but I'm looking at the personality. Once in a while, I'll be wrong, you know, but I'm always looking for that, all right, who's, like, after I've cast everyone, I'm looking for, like, all right, who's going to be the pain in the butt, you know, but I'm kind of getting to, you know, I can't say I have perfected, but I'm getting to a point where, you know, it's like, you know, a weeding process of weeding people out. You know, I think I'm just blessed that they've shown their hands kind of early.
Well, I also think that, like, some people have a really good judge of character, and like you said, like, you met me, and then like 5 minutes later, you knew that I was probably someone you wanted to work with.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty easy
I was looking at that quality.
Yeah, it's not like something you can teach, but it's just like, you know, you kind of get someone's energy, and you're like, is this someone that I want to be working with for the next couple of weeks? Is this someone that I don't really think I can work with? You know, and that's fine. And everyone's going to have a different thing, you know?
I think, to backtrack what you said, could you say, you said, we made a transition into, like, from where we first started. I think that this, at least as far as I'm concerned, this kind of all goes into, because I've always looked at this lockdown, or whatever we want to call it now, as a reboot. You know, so it's like we get a chance to reboot, you know, for those that are listening or will listen, you know, in this time capsule, you get a chance to reboot, you know, and get a different perspective of, you know, what you thought the business was.
Yeah.
What it is now to you. You know what I'm saying? You're getting older and wiser, so it's like, all right, you know that you're a certain age, and they're going to start looking at you this and that and that. So now it's like, okay, well, now I need to do things a little bit different. You know, maybe that's only in New York that they're looking at you that way. So let's say you flew out to California and they were looking at you for the high school high person.
Right.
You don't know. You go out there and be like, damn, I'm getting a lot of goddamn high school, calls to like, read something for high school. It's just a different energy out here.
Yeah, and every market's different. Like, you're going to be looked at. Like, there are types and archetypes in the industry that probably will stay that way, consistent across those different markets. But, like, yeah, maybe in LA you look younger to them, or maybe, like, people in New York, maybe it might just be, like, the demographic of the people that are there, and it's, like, compared to the rest of the people who are coming in, you look younger or you look older, and this is, like, going to be more of what your niche here. And that's totally and that takes time to figure out. And, I think that's really a really good resource for you, is, like, go in the holding rooms and look around and, like, see who's there. And not, like, necessarily to, like, flesh out your competition or, like, figure out who's there, but, like, be like, do these people look like me? Like, am I being brought in because of this? Or am I being brought in because they think that this kid could play my kid? Or, like, there's so many different ways. And you're not going to be able to know what they're thinking behind the table, but it is kind of interesting. It's good to get to know yourself in that casting perspective, and be able to be like, well, I know that this is what they're thinking about me for, so this is how I'm going to cater my audition to it. Or, specifically if it's, like, for a role and it's not a film where it's brand new, like, but, like, specifically for a musical, like, I'm going to go in and sing something motherly if I'm auditioning for the mother role, but I'm going to sing something a little bit younger, a little bit more youthful, maybe a bit more contemporary if I'm going in for something that's not a mother, or, like, going in for, like, the romantic part. There's so many ways to cater your auditions to the parts, and it's so smart. You just have to be, the problem with this, not the problem, but, like, people and actors are so adaptable and so smart about these kind of things. Like, you have to make the smart choices for you.
And that comes with experience, I guess.
It does. I mean, and sometimes there are people who, like, get out of college, or even, are, like, 10 and 15, and they're working because, like, that they have their niche there. And, like, I have friends who were, in college, or friends that I met through professional theater jobs, that, like, their niche is right away. Like, I have a very good friend who is, like, maybe 2 or 3 years younger than me, but consistently plays, like, a teenager, because he's not, I wouldn't say petite, that's, like, the wrong build, but, like, he's got a younger frame, he's got a smaller frame. He's a fantastic actor, but, it's funny because, like, thinking about joining union and, like, when you need to do that, it's so specific, and people ask me about that all the time, like, because sometimes I mentor some of these younger kids here, specifically, like, I was, like, assistant choreographer, and, like, working with these kids who were, still in high school, and they would come and ask me about these kind of things, like, about the business and going equity, and I'm like, it's so specific to every person, because, like, my friend who I was just mentioning, he went equity right out of college because, he booked the national tour of Warhorse. But the thing is, like, understudying the lead, Albert, who's, supposed to be, a 14, 15-year-old boy? And he was like, here's the thing, like, I will be able to transition and change the choices I make in the audition room when I start to look older, but as long as I'm in this niche of playing, like, the love hungry teen, or, like, the loner in high school, and those kind of things, where it's like, I can do these roles, I'm going to work a lot right now, so I'm going to join the union. But then you, like, ask someone like me, who isn't even in her type yet, hasn't aged into my type yet. Like, there was no point for me to join equity if it had become available to me. And I actually, because I've been in SAG, I guess I could just buy into equity, but I chose not to, just because I was like, I'm not going to work. Like, you have to think about who you are and what you bring to the table, and if you're not going to work in the industry because you're just not aged into your type, or, like, there's something, it's just not that your time, then why would you pay into a union that's not going to support you or help you with anything? And that's not to say that they're not a helpful resource for actors, and I'm not trying to badmouth any of the unions. But, it's like, you got to make those choices for you. And I feel like, specifically, and I know you and I have had this talk before about going SAG and, like, being all these things, and it's like, putting, not that you're not limiting yourself necessarily, but you're putting yourself in the same playing field with, specifically with SAG, it's like with Oscar award-winning actors, you know, and that doesn't mean that you can't be successful, but it's also like you're limiting yourself from, there's just so many more, specifically now because of, you know, the web series and the people self-producing so much more, it's like there's so much more non-union stuff. So, and luckily now with the things that they're doing, like, I mean, and I know that you as a filmmaker use both union and non-union actors, but it's like, it's a lot less, like, how, you know, it's a lot less parts out there. If there's one SAG contract that you're allowed to give, are you going to give it to me? Are you going to give it to someone who's older, like, and fits the part in a different way? You know, and it's hard. And it's hard when you think about these things in the business, because like people will think of like acting and then it's so glamorous and like these stars who are just walking on the red carpet, and you know, and it's like, nah, man, it is a full-time job trying to be a performer, and it is something that you need to like really, really invest your time in and invest your business mind in and figure out exactly how you're going to do the best you can. And if that means, and like you were saying before, if that means that you are not working and you need to create your own work, like, why not? That's a great way to do it. And then you have stuff for your reel, even if it doesn't get picked up, and even if, you know, you have to do like a fundraising thing or a GoFundMe or whatever to be able to produce it, it's still being able to be creative. And I feel like specifically in the times of COVID, where there's so little opportunity to be able to flex your creative muscles, it's kind of a really fun idea to put up your own show, to put up your own thing. Even here, like, we're talking, a couple of my actor friends here were talking about putting up a cabaret or putting up a show that's like a 3-person cast. So like, we can, you know, quarantine and be safe and produce it in a COVID safe and friendly environment. Or not COVID friendly, like, you know what I mean, like for people to be able to come see it. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's kind of cool that we have now, because the rug's kind of been pulled out from underneath us, now we have to be forced to adapt and do these kind of things. And I think that's really great in the sense that if you can find ways to be able to feed your creative side and your creative self, then why wouldn't you?
But it's something that you said I want to ask for you to expound on. You mentioned equity.
Yeah.
Right? Can you explain exactly what that is, especially to me, because it's...
Oh, sure.
Is there a difference between... I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is actors' equity?
Yes.
Correct or no? Okay,
yes,
so
there's a difference between...
Is there a difference between actors' equity and SAG?
Yes.
I remember last time we talked, I think you said that they merged or they're underneath the umbrella of SAG. Is that correct, or is that not?
So it's a little bit confusing. So here's the thing. SAG and AFTRA, so the Screen Actors Guild, and then I believe AFTRA, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the American Federation of TV and Radio Artists is AFTRA. Mm-hmm. So those are the unions for performers who are either, you know, radio DJs or, you know, some set contracts are AFTRA, but I think most of them are now SAG. And the thing is, those unions decided to merge because they were really similar mediums, so they could merge. Actors Equity Association is the professional theater actors union. So anyone who's on Broadway is a part of Actors Equity. Anyone who's working in an equity house, unless they're doing a special contract or doing like a equity membership candidacy contract, which means like you get points towards getting your equity card, but you're not equity yet, stuff like that. It's any professional theater is going to probably be an equity house. And it's like, you know, there's union rules. It's how long you can rehearse, how long you can do that. And with equity, it's, you know, it's the same thing with like SAG, where it's like, you know, if you join equity, you're competing with people who might have possibly just done a Broadway show. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, you're still only really competing with yourself, but at the same time, like, you're putting yourself into a pool of actors who probably have a lot more experience than you do. And then, but yeah, that's what I was mentioning. It was more saying, like, I've decided to not go equity because I knew that I was leaving the city, and I knew that there weren't as many equity opportunities out here. Like, but the thing is, with equity and SAG-AFTRA, because now they're SAG-AFTRA, is they're technically sister unions. as far as, and I hope I'm not saying this incorrectly, and if any of your listeners out there know exactly how to describe this and I describe it wrong, like, I know I'm not the expert. I'm just saying this is what I've been taught. They're sister unions. So if you, and these dates might be wrong, and it also might be old rules. I don't know at this point, but I know for a fact that if you are in good standing with one of the two unions, typically after, I think, 2 years of good standing with the union, you can buy into the other. So, like, I have a friend who, in the city, who got her SAG card by doing a lot of background on TV shows. She had a couple features and some like under fives, or not, maybe not even speaking, but like featured extra stuff for some TV shows and some movies, and she was doing that for a while, and so she eventually got enough vouchers, and I'm sure you can explain that better than I can, but got enough vouchers to be able to join SAG-AFTRA. Then she decided that she was sick and tired of not getting seen at equity auditions, and she had been, in good standing and was working decently consistently, and this was obviously pre-pandemic, before all of the shit hit the fan, but she was like, you know what, I'm just going to go. This is something I feel like I'm ready to do. I need to go, and she went into the Actors Equity headquarters, which we actors call the Equity Center, and she paid the down payment to join the union, and they gave her equity card. So you can join. For me, I just know that I didn't want to, because I've been in good standing with SAG, I believe, since 2012, when that was the merger, because I was a member of AFTRA from doing radio, like studio recording stuff back like a long time ago, and AFTRA was at the time cheap to join. I mean, I think it was like 16. I say this and people are gonna be like, that's not cheap, but like I think it was $1,600 at the time to join, and I think now SAG-AFTRA. I keep on saying just SAG, but I mean SAG-AFTRA. I think it's like $3,200, or the last I checked, it's pretty expensive now to join, but because you're joining a double union, you know what I mean? So I decided, I was like, so I'm not the authority on specifically Screen Actors Guild, because I've never actually worked a Screen Actors Guild project, but because I was grandfathered into the union, I now have SAG status. And I pay my dues, just because I feel like it's important to keep that card, unless I decided to, like, officially leave the union. But, like, what harm is it doing for me to pay them a couple $100s a year to be able to keep that status? You know what I mean? It's silly to not do it. And now that we're being able to work more for things that are not necessarily SAG projects, but you can bring in SAG guest artists, I think that was, I feel like for me it was the right decision. Maybe not for everyone it would have been, but you all gotta, at the end of the day, you gotta do what's right for you.
Okay, so let me ask you.
The long and short of that was what you were asking is, I believe they're sister unions, so they're not. Which is, it gets sticky and difficult, and like there are exceptions to things, but like I know for a fact that like you can buy into one of the other if you are in good standing with that union. But what's weird is like a SAG-AFTRA actor can't go to an equity audition and get equity status, like get seen like an equity member, but there are other unions that can. It's all complicated, and it's, red tape and politics and bureaucracy and whatever, but I know for a fact that they're sister unions. And technically, I guess you're supposed to join both if you like eventually, but they don't police that. Like there's not going to be equity jurisdiction on a SAG set. Like they don't need that,
So here's a question. Have you, if you might know, if not, do you know anybody? Can you leave SAG and then come back in, or is the process you have to start all over again?
That's a really good question.
You have to get waivers.
I don't actually know.
You said you don't know the SAG side, right?
Yeah, I don't, because I'm technically a member, but like I've never done a SAG project. I know that there's a term for it, and I completely forget what it's called. Oh my gosh! And we're gonna end this call, and I'm gonna be like, "That's what it is." But I know people who have kind of like, they like, I guess it's like they pause their status with the union. I'm not describing this correctly, but it's like you're allowed to do non-union work, but you don't get, like, you're still technically on the SAG roster, but you also can't, like, you don't get the SAG after award screeners, like, you don't get the benefits of being a SAG member, but, like, you haven't left the union. It's kind of like, it's like, I guess, like, the way I kind of equate it is during the pandemic, they would allow you to freeze your gym membership. So I guess it's kind of a freeze, and there's a term for it, and I forget what it is, because, like, I know a filmmaker in the city who's had a bit of success creating his own work. Like, some of his stuff is on Amazon Prime, and, like, you know, stuff like that. And one of his new projects just got picked up for, like, a series or something, but like all self-produced, all, you know. But he was thinking about, it's not furloughed. Gosh, I'm gonna have to figure this out, and I'll let you know eventually whenever I figure it out. But he was like, yeah, I'm thinking about going this, but I forget what it is. Because he's like, because I think I just work a lot more, because, you know, I've been in SAG, and it's just, there's not as much work. And I obviously, this was way before the pandemic. This had to have been like 2017 or 2018. And I was just like, oh, that's something you can do. And he's like, yeah. And then he, like, kind of explained it to me. But he works pretty consistently, so I'm pretty sure that didn't actually happen. But, you know, he's got a very specific look, and he's pretty attractive, and he's Indian, so, like, he's ethnic and a good-looking man, and so he does pretty well for himself. But there is a way that you can kind of, I guess I will call it, freeze your membership, where it's like you're still a member, but, like, you can't go to the gym. Like, you know, like, for instance, here, like, I go to this gym chain called The Edge. It's not in the city, but it's kind of like a Planet Fitness, but a little bit nicer. And I froze my membership for like 4 or 5 months during the pandemic because I wasn't comfortable going, but I was still a member. You know what I mean? I just couldn't, like, if I wanted to go to the gym, I couldn't unless I paid my membership fees, I guess. I forget what the term is. Now I'm going to have to figure this out because I really don't remember, and I know it's a thing.
It's not like deferred or anything like that, is it?
I don't think it's called deferring. Gosh, there's a specific term for it, and it's totally escaping me. And I'm sure there are people who are going to be listening to this who's like, it's this, you dummy. Like,
it's this, you.
Like, how do you not know? Like, I'm only on my first cup of coffee. I'm doing the best I can, you know.
I'm going to call SAG and report you and say, do you know that Amelia Nemeth has no idea that it's called... Oh, I'm
totally going to get kicked out of the union for that one.
Then you'll get something in the mail.
We have revoked your...
We had no idea.
We heard you talking smack.
On this podcast, we reviewed your application because you didn't know what the business was.
Right. So goofy.
So, you know, I was just something I was always curious of, because I just wondered if, you know, you could step out and step back in, or if you had to, like, well, you're going to have to get those 3 waivers again. Like,
I would hope that that's not the case, but I know in equity, what I briefly mentioned, there's a thing called the Equity Membership Candidacy, EMC for short. And maybe it's not candidacy, or like you're an equity member candidate. I don't know. It's been a while. Regardless, I know that you have a certain amount of time. I believe it's now like 25 points, but it used to be 50 points. And 50 points equals 1 week of work in an equity house. So once you acquire your points, you have, you have a certain amount of time to join the union before you lose all your points, and then you have to start all over again in order to earn them again. So a lot of people who are in that situation choose to join at the last possible second because they want to keep their non-union status, but they also don't want to have to start all over again earning their points, you know? Because I had friends, one of my really good friends, who to this day, like one of my best friends, they went to UConn acting program, the University of Connecticut, And they do this interesting thing. Maybe they don't do it anymore, but they did when she was in school. And they do this thing where you are working all 4 years of your degree at the Connecticut Repertory Theater, which is produced on campus, but it is a professional repertory theater and equity house. So by the time you graduate college at 21, 22, or however old you are when you decided to get your bachelor's, you have enough points to join the union. And it's kind of cool that they do that, but the problem with that is because a lot of the people, a lot of people like me, like if this was my situation, I don't know what I would have done, because I probably would have joined just because earning 50 weeks again is a lot of work, and it takes a lot of effort to book those jobs, much less, even get into those auditions. But I don't know what I would have done, because I know for a fact that, like, I'm still not at my age range that I need to be able to be consistently working, and so it would suck, like, kind of being forced to join the union. And I guess that recently, like a year or two ago, they lowered the number of weeks you need to get in order to join. So I have friends, actually a couple of them in Richmond, where they were working for one of the theaters that's technically an equity house, but like they hired non-union actors as well and give them their EMC card. But they thought they had 20 points to go, and then all of a sudden they get a letter from equity being like, "Oh, you're eligible to join now, so if you want to," you know what I mean? It's an interesting thing, and there's a reason they specifically did that, and I am not educated about why, and I'm sure that I could literally call one of my friends who did join through this new circumstance, but I don't remember why. I don't know if it was like because they wanted more people to join the union. I don't know if it's just because they realized that 50 weeks is a lot of time to earn, like, who knows, but it's stuff like that where it's like, I know for a fact I don't know about with SAG or anything like that, because I think SAG, once you have your waivers, I don't think there's like a time limit on that, but I know with equity there's a time limit on when you can use your points to get your card, and if you don't use them, you lose them. Okay. Eventually. I don't know. It's weird. It's all business. It's a business, so they got to make money somehow, right?
I was going to say it's all politics. That's what it sounded like. Our numbers are down. We need to push this up. I think it was because they wanted more people to join. I mean, obviously they wanted more people to join, or they wouldn't have lowered the requirements. But it's funny because there were a lot of people in my circles even that were kind of upset about it, because they're like, man, I had to work 50 weeks to get my card, and now you're just going to hand it to someone who's literally, worked for a quarter, or like a half year at an equity house, and now they get to join. And like, I mean, personally, I just don't give a shit. Like, you want to join the union if you can. If you don't, then don't. Like, do whatever you need to do. Eventually, if you're working there long enough, you're going to join a union. I can tell you this little thing. I'm sure that they have this. This is another politic part of it.
Yeah.
This is back when I used to intern at Young, right?
Oh, yeah.
When that was still a thing, I was looking over. I had like access to like they had me like doing some like clerical stuff at one point, and I had access to contracts to a specific film. I'm not going to say the film.
Yeah, no.
And
I get it.
It basically, it showed me everybody that pretty much got grandfathered in. They basically grandfathered people in. I'm looking at the contract like, wait a minute, this person isn't an actor. This person, because they were basically personalities, quote unquote personalities. I'll leave it at that. And I'm looking at the contracts, and they were just grandfathering them in. And I was like, wow, so all these people just got into a union because they were doing this big ensemble film.
Right.
And they didn't put in any 50 hours or whatever. Again, it's just politics. It's just the perspective. All right, so they didn't do the 50 hours, but that doesn't mean that they're going to have the same career that you're going to have.
Correct.
At the end of the day, they got in, and then their window of opportunity is, all right, they're on like, a love and hip hop show, and they're the most popular person. Like, all right, let's say like I just read that Cardi B booked a feature film.
She was also
hot right now,
right?
Say again?
She was in Hustlers with the Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah, But
oh my gosh, the Jennifer Lopez movie.
A lot of Jennifers. Here's the funny thing. It's like she was in it. She was a bit part, but they were writing it up like she was going to be a major. I'm like this is like friggin' small. But then it's a marketing thing, Jennifer. Because I remember reading Jennifer Lopez article about her talking with Cardi B and convincing her, yada yada yada. And I was like, all right, as I thought about it, I said, okay, I get it. It was a strategy because she was an ex-stripper. It gives it more legitimacy for her movie, and then we'll market her as if she's going to be in it. It'll put more asses in seats, but like her stuff was small. I thought like she was going to have at least 15, 16 lines. She probably had less than 3 lines. But
I remember seeing that she was in that, and it's kind of like putting. Lady Gaga is a different beast because she came from like the acting world and was a theater actor before she ever did music. But like, it's kind of like putting Taylor Swift in a movie where it's like people are going to watch it because they love Taylor Swift. They don't care how good of an actor she is. With Cardi B, it was a little bit more strategic in the sense of what you said, where it's like, she was a former stripper and has talked about it in her music and stuff like that. But it's like, she was at the time, and she still is very, very popular. She was the top-selling female rap artist. Not even the fact that she was a former stripper.
She just booked a film, too, where she's actually going to be a lead. But I bring this all up to say that, this could only be because, I'm saying, speculating, because she's hot right now.
Yeah.
Now, if this movie's a bomb, you know how the business is. You get a couple of bombs, or they might just give you one bomb, and after that it's like, she's out of here, whatever. But, if you're still beefing about, she didn't do her 50 hours, it's like, she's going to get her money. Do her thing, and by the time you hit 2020 friggin' 4, you'll be on the Blacklist spinoff,
right?
Bringing in 70,000-80,000, the first season a week, and then you're gonna bring you in for the second, and it's gonna be more money,
right?
And that's gonna lead to a H&R Block commercial, and yada yada yada. And meanwhile,
and then you have to work for the rest of your life.
Her film bombed, or she did one film was a hit, then the next film bombed, and then she's kind of on her way out, and then the music career is kind of like settling off or whatever. So it doesn't make any sense to like we did it 50 and I got to do this and this. I get it, but at the same time, at the same time, it's like a different. Different perspective.
It's all politics and business. I will say, I should clarify, there are multiple ways to join unions. You don't just have to get waivers. You don't have to, I know people who, there was this woman I worked with in New York, probably in 2007, which is, it's weird that that's almost 15 years ago, that's just strange to me, but, and I was probably 21 or 22 at the time, and I did this off-Broadway rock musical, and this woman, so they had a couple equity people in it, but most of the people who were in it were non-union. And I remember talking to her about how she got her union card, and she's like, it's funny, I think I was 18, and I was working in New York, and she's like, and back then, because she was probably in her mid-40s at this point, she was like, and back then, if you got a job, they just gave you your card. They were like, this is an equity show, so here's your card. It's a little bit different now, and they're trying to, I guess the equity membership candidacy program is to try to get younger people interested in the union and give them an opportunity to join if they'd like. But if they want you to do a show, or they want you to do a movie, or they want you to do things, there are so many people, say Olivia Wilde in 1984 on Broadway. I think she was in that. And if I'm wrong, there was a film actor who, I don't know if she was equity before that point, but they were like, we want you to be in this Broadway show, so we're going to give you your equity card so you can do it, because unfortunately with the way that it works, for theater contracts specifically is like you're not allowed to like walk on the stage unless you have a contract with the union. That could mean that they like do a special contract so you don't have to join the union, et cetera, et cetera. But like they're gonna if they want you in the show, they'll give you the card. If they want you in the movie, they'll give you the card. It's like you don't have to. Like, I'm not talking about already famous people or like Cardi B, getting her SAG card because she was cast in a movie, like because she's Cardi B. It's like I'm talking about us, like little people who aren't famous, who are working every day becoming a professional performer and like being a professional performer. So like those are different. There's so many different ways to join these unions, and I should have clarified that. But like yes, there like me.
Sorry. You don't, as far as I'm concerned, you didn't have to clarify. I was just saying,
right.
Like the whole thing just came from someone saying, being upset. Hey, I had to do this and that, but then now you just got to come in and like look at the bigger picture. That person is going to be in a junkie, and that's going to be done. You're going to be here for another 16 years doing this. You won't even be thinking about that person. It basically comes down to perspective. The politics that they don't know about, you only know about this person because somebody told you that they crept into the union and didn't do the 50 hours. You don't know about da-da-da-da-da that, is in friggin' this movie and didn't do blah, 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 blah. If you really found that out, then you'd probably shit a brick. But at the end of the day, you're on your journey, they're on their journey. And it just is what it is. You still at the end of the day, you still have to focus in on what you're going to do. No matter if I snuck in and you didn't get in, it's not going to help you.
No, and also
it's not going to help you.
Yeah, like why do you need to worry about what other people are doing?
Exactly.
Exactly.
But I mean, we've strayed so much away from the whole pandemic. I guess
I mean, when are we not tangential?
Of course, because I was listening to earlier, and it's like we just went in a whole other direction, and we just brought it back.
But there's
things
that, like that's a natural flow of a conversation. Like if it wasn't a conversation and an interview, like we probably would have stayed a little bit more on topic. Where it's like, so Amelia, like, what is your name? What is your favorite?
Exactly. It's what makes, like you're saying, it's what makes, an episode good. It's just that it's just organic and it just, kind of, free flows, into, what's it going to be.
Right.
So let me ask you this. While this was going on, how many auditions did you tape for yourself? Did you have to tape anything? Basically, were you still active outside of the play? Like, were you like, they had this and in the variety or backstage, let me go read for this or whatever? Was everything just completely shut down and no one was moving at all?
I mean, for a little while it was, but I also, the thing is, what I'll say is like I wasn't looking to pursue. I wasn't actively pursuing outside work because I knew that I had that show lined up and I didn't want anything to conflict with it because we were still hoping that we would still get to do it. And we are, you know what I mean? And we're still doing that. So like, I'm not the best person to ask about that, but I will say something that's interesting with like the pandemic is that not that I've done auditions, but people have asked me to submit, have submitted like videos of me singing things or videos of me doing acting things for like fundraisers for these theater companies that have been forced to shut their doors. Like for instance, I did a virtual performance for one of the theater companies. I think it was Giving Back Tuesday or whatever that fundraising, that big fundraiser. I forget the name of it, and I apologize to anyone who's involved in that. But it's this big fundraising Tuesday, and they asked me to submit a video for it. And then another time, I was asked to do like some Zoom readings for people's plays. And then another time, one of my friends asked me to do a couple songs to submit for an LGBTQ plus cabaret that was holiday themed. So like I have been doing things that are creative. It's just a little bit different. I was also asked to do a radio play, so that was cool. There's things that I have been doing. I will say I haven't been pursuing work, but because of what I've been doing in my life that's not performance based, but at the same time I haven't been turning down opportunities either. Like if I've been asked to perform, I'm going to do it. And like I actually just had a meeting with one of my very good friends here discussing the possibility of putting up a musical together, and it's a 3-person cast, and it's a show that is from like the 90s, and it's very widely loved, but it's not, I'm not going to say anything yet because we don't know if we're going to get the rights, but it's very widely loved, but it's not done very often because it's such a big undertaking for 3 actors to do. But at the same time, it could be something that maybe we don't perform for an audience, but we stream it. You know what I mean? Like, there are things that you can do. And so I have been finding ways to feed my creative side, even if it's like, oh, I did like a Zoom reading. And I have a group of friends here that they did this thing for a while. I never got to do one of these readings, but they would do like a weekly reading of a play. And they would Zoom together and they would read it. And it kind of gave them an outlet for that energy that they weren't, because, you know, some of these people were literally 2 or 3 weeks out from putting up a show, and they, you know, and it was hard for them to let go of that, because some people were in the middle of like heavy, intense rehearsals. I will say I was very fortunate with what happened with Mamma Mia, is that we only had 1 rehearsal. So it's not like I had done all this work and then everything was shut down. Like, I was lucky enough that I hadn't put in a crazy amount of effort yet. You know, but it's cool that there people are finding other ways. Like I have another friend here who did it was actually streamed on Broadway on demand. They did a Zoom production of Clue, the movie musical, not the musical, sorry, the movie play thing, and it was kind of fun that actors are finding, and creatives and theater people and film and TV people are figuring out ways to do things. Like even with like Leslie Odom Jr. and his wife Nicolette, they produced a TV show during the pandemic, and it's called Love in the Time of Corona, and they put it on, I think it was on Lifetime, and like everyone, like she and him acted opposite each other because, you know, they're already married, they're quarantining together, you know, and so there are things that people are doing and being creative, and it's kind of inspiring, and it shows that, you know, just because our normal way of life has changed, that doesn't mean that we can't still create things and do things. So I think that's really cool. And it's nice to know that like the people who are in my community are still finding ways to feed their souls. And that's really nice.
I could only see like industry people, you know, wigging out when this first happened and things like that. I'm sure they basically were watching everyone else and then, you know, doing what they normally do, which is, well, that worked, let's just do 5 more of those. Right. You know, because I think there was another show that, I'm not sure if that show, it ran a couple of weeks, but they had a show that was on Zoom as well. Yeah. And I never watched it, and then I remember reading something that they you know, killed it off, they canceled it. And I was like, okay, well, that, I guess, was fun while it lasted, you know, whatever. But, you know, I guess, that, you know, they felt like people weren't watching it or whatever. Because, I mean, people still, I mean, put it like this, maybe, you know, I don't know. I'll just leave it at that. Because I can't say whether or not it was good or not. But I don't know, you know, like why they canceled it. Maybe, you know, again, it could just be politics.
It could be nothing to do with the show itself.
Yeah. This isn't, you know, it's not, you know, such and such. So, you know, I want such and such. So, you know, forget that. Or it could just be money related. I'm not going to spend the rest of this budget when we could be spending it on, you know, Brooklyn 911 or what's it, 311 or 911 or something like that.
No, I think it's Brooklyn 99.
Brooklyn 99. Thank you. I should have known when I put 911. It was like, wait, that's not it. But yeah, I'd rather allocate the budget, you know, to Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I haven't seen it in maybe 3 seasons. It just you know what it was? It was all the moving around. So when it left Fox and it went to NBC and it was on Mondays, and then it like went on a freeze for whatever reason. I think maybe football or something. Then it was gone, and then I'm like, wait a minute, they're in like season 8. Like, wait a minute, I was just watching it. It was like, wow, like, oh man. But anyhow, as I digress.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, in a nutshell, you weren't really sweating anything, you know.
Right.
While the pandemic was, you know, I on the other hand, I wasn't really sweating anything. It's just that, you know, I had like some ideas that I wanted to do, and I was like, oh man, so that's gonna get put back like another year. But then I realized, like, you know what, these years go by so fast. But it was just me watching to see, like, all right, so how is this gonna go down? And just watching, and I did an episode where I pretty much predicted, you know, what was gonna happen, you know, with the streaming and with, you know, them trying to, you know, start productions and you know, having to stop because someone's going to get sick, and I knew it, and it's still happening today. They started up, you know, the episode, you know, a season for something, and they had to stop because of regulations and yada, 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 and they picked back up, and, you know, but, you know, I was reading an article the other day, I skimmed through it, and I can't remember the person it was, but he was saying basically, you know, he's feeling like by June, you know, the smoke is going to, you know, be cleared up on this, you know, and things should be like, you know, slowly getting back to
I think luckily we're finally like kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's that's nice considering we've kind of been in this limbo for so long. You know, and so what did they say? I mean, I kind of made a reference to this joke before earlier in this recording, but I remember being like, I read this meme or like this thing on Instagram where it was like, remember when back in March when it was just 2 weeks to flatten the curve? And I was like, oh fuck, you're right.
You know?
It's been like almost a year.
I have a feeling that something within the year's time, because we're getting closer, something like there's going to be some sort of big announcement. I don't know what it's going to be. You know, it's going to be something that is going to be like, hey, you know, now it's been a year, so we're going to do da-da-da-da-da, you know.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's forcing us to adapt and figure out different ways to create, and I think that's really cool. And like I said before, what I was talking about before, it's like it's going to change the landscape of this industry and of everything, because, you know, like thinking about even corporate America, there's so many people who now you've learned from the pandemic that like you don't need to go in the office to do your job. So like
saying that for years.
Yeah, I mean, I still have always felt that way, and it's so interesting being in Connecticut because there's so many New York, you know, finance people, or like, not just finance people, but like any of the people who are working in those big corporate offices.
They were commuting.
They're not even commuting. They came here, and they were like, you know what? I don't want to pay all this money to not have to be, like, I don't need to be in the office anymore. I'm doing everything remote. I'm going to buy a house, and like, we're going to have a backyard for our kids. And it's kind of funny because where everyone else, not like, okay, I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but I'm sure the suburbs around these big cities, their real estate markets are going crazy because you can't sell a house fast enough. Because everyone's looking to move, because they're all like, you know what, like, I've done the New York thing, I don't need to go into the office anymore, I'm going to work from home, and I'm going to, like, live in the woods, and it's going to be great. And it's interesting being on the receiving end of that where I live, where it's like a lot of people who were former New Yorkers are moving up here. I will say the COVID pandemic definitely reaffirmed my choices of leaving the city, but that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean I think that anyone who chose to stay made the wrong call. It's all individual. I think that if you chose to stay, good on you. I don't know if I had still been in New York when the pandemic hit, if I would have stayed or gone, because, you know, one of my main ways of paying my rent in the city was waiting tables and bartending, and that for a while was completely shut down. Not that, you know, unemployment wasn't there to help people, but at the same time, you know, you go from making $300 a night to making an extra $600 a week with the stimulus. It's just not the same.
you said something that I had a thought, and it came and went so fast. Ah, crap.
Hold on, let's go back. So we were talking about like waiting tables and making money in the stimulus packages, and we were also talking about, going on unemployment and trying to make your life live that way. Is that bringing up anything?
Well, I was going to say, it was something else. This isn't it, but I was going to say, you basically, you were ahead of the curve. And, it was, you timed it just right. To make the decision. No one could predict this, but you timed it just right. So, at the end of the day, you won. And just listening to the conversation, we're having, it's not like you were spazzing out, so it's like, you had already made the transition here, or where you're at in Connecticut.
Right.
And you were just, you had your game plan worked out, the only, you were already active, in the as far as acting and everything. It's just that this new glitch just happened, and it's not like you had a heavy transition. It seemed like the only transition was just, doing this play.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I'm extremely fortunate that I work. My father, so the job I had waiting for me, my father owns a aerospace manufacturing business. And we are direct suppliers to Pratt & Whitney, who they make jet engines and aerospace parts and like planes and stuff. They are supply stuff like Boeing and to Airbus and et cetera, et cetera. They were deemed an essential business. So my company, who's a direct supplier to them, was then therefore in the chain of command deemed an essential business. So I will say I'm extremely lucky that like my job never stopped. So I always had a salary. I never had the stress that a lot of my friends in the city and a lot of my friends, everywhere had, where it's like, are we going to keep working? Like, how do I need to look for another job? I mean, it's crazy, like on top of just the stress of, this deadly virus infecting so many people. It's like, people are now out of work and like can't afford their bills, and it's difficult. I have a friend here in Connecticut actually who's a landlord, and he's kind of experiencing the other side of it, where it's like this woman can't pay her rent, but he also, because it's a pandemic, can't kick her out. So now he's losing money, and I get both sides of it. It's difficult. And I wish we could provide free housing for people. I know that that's not necessarily realistic, and I don't even need to open up that can of politics worms, but it's difficult to see both sides of it, where it's like, yeah, people really are struggling. And I will say, I'm very, very lucky and fortunate and aware of my privilege and aware of how fortunate I have been in this pandemic, that I wasn't affected in ways that so many of my friends are, and so many people in the world are. And I mean, I will even say, I actually already had COVID, and I even getting the virus.
You did?
Yeah, I did. I was wondering if we were going to get to that. I got the virus back in October. I know, right? I got the virus back in October, and what's crazy is I wasn't sick at all. The only reason I knew that something was wrong is because I couldn't smell anything, and so I went and got tested. Then the thing is, what's crazy is I during the pandemic, I had gotten surgery over the summer. An elective procedure, but I decided to go forward with it, and I had to get tested for that, and I was negative then, and then I went to visit a friend in Virginia and North Carolina, which are deemed red states in the travel advisories with Connecticut, and I didn't get it then, but I got it from hanging out with one of my friends whose parents are teachers, and they were asymptomatic, and he was asymptomatic, and I got it from them. And it's so funny because it's just I'm not, please know that I'm not saying that this virus isn't serious. I'm saying I was very, very fortunate that I did not have a serious case of it. Because I know a lot of people who have been very heavily affected by it, whether it was someone they knew that passed, someone that their family had passed, or someone who was in the hospital. I have a friend whose father is still in ICU. This is a very, very scary time. But I will say, even on top of what's going on with the world, it's I really was very fortunate, because I didn't even have a fever. Like, I didn't have a fever. I didn't have any, like, sick symptoms. I was just, like, slightly tired and, had to stay in my house for 14 days. Like, darn, so I have to sit on the couch and watch Netflix? Okay. But, like, I'm not, please know I'm making that joke, but I hope that no one is offended me making light of that situation.
No one is. If you guys are offended, then you should beat it off this channel.
Right, like we're not, and I'm just saying my experience with it wasn't serious, and I'm aware that I'm extremely, extremely lucky because it could have been something totally different.
Well, you're not the only one, because I've seen a couple of people, with celebrities that have had the same thing. But a week or so ago, there was a doctor. I think it's Urso. I think it's Richard Urso. That's his name. But he was, doing an interview, and he was saying that, from his findings, that the asymptomatic people, if you're by an asymptomatic person, it's actually helping you to build an immunity,
right?
Strong immunity, against it, because the percentage is extremely, extremely low. So you got a low percentage, and then that you couldn't taste anything, you couldn't smell anything.
Right. I mean, I couldn't smell anything. So which when you can't smell anything, it makes your taste buds very dulled. But I could taste things.
Okay. So it's like you got that little, that little pie of it, that little 1% that you got from that, whereas other people, got hit majorly, or maybe. Someone has, diabetes. I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't know about a lot of people. So, you
right.
can have, like, LeBron James go, I got COVID. And he's like, oh, man, he's going to be out there. But then you find out he also has sickle cell anemia or some things that they never talk about that actually, enhance that. So, like, so, yeah, he really got hammered. So, when I heard that, I was like, because, look, from my perspective and from the research that I've done, they're still learning about this.
No one knows.
So it's like, exactly. So it's not like, I don't take everything for like, wait a minute, you don't really have it because you didn't even experience that. And then it's like, no, everyone's going to be different. I'll get the flu for 2 days. You might get the same flu for me, and it may be a week for you.
Yeah.
It's the same thing like we were talking about with the union thing. Everybody's different. You don't do the 50 hours. It's pretty much the same thing.
Right.
But, that's wow. I would have never even, figured that in and say, hey, did you get caught out there?
Yeah, I know, right?
But,
And it's funny, like, I definitely was cautious. I definitely was safe, but, like, I would go because I lived alone, so I would have to go to the grocery store, and I would have to go to these things. And we were, because my business was open, we worked from home for a couple months, but then it got to the point where, like, we needed to go back to the office to continue doing our jobs. And, I was in the office 5 times a week, and I was doing, or like, at least 3 days a week, and 2 days I'd do remote. And so, like, the funniest thing is, like, you just never know where you're going to catch it. And I have a friend who got it back in the summer and had a pretty bad case of it. Granted, like, he was not hospitalized, but he was pretty sick, and he, like, every one of his friends that he came in contact with tested negative. So he has no idea where he got it. Like, at all. So it's just really interesting, and it's kind of funny. I will say when you test positive, you have to call everyone that you've like been in touch with and contact with, and it's kind of like calling people and telling them you have herpes. Like and I know, like, not that I have any experience with that, but it kind of felt like telling them like I had an STD, and it's so funny because there are people who get really uptight about it, and they're like, oh my god, well, like, I hope you didn't give it to me, like the same kind of situation. And it's so funny because I luckily didn't experience that with most of the people I was around, or like any of my my job or anything. But like my friend who had it over the summer, his friends are doctors, and they his friends are doctors, and they were all negative, and they're like, well, we better not get it from you because like we can't not work. And it's like, yeah, but like that's not the emotion you need to be presenting to someone when they're telling you that like they've contracted what could potentially be a deadly virus. Like, that's not, especially during a pandemic where like they still don't know, they know it's very contagious and they still don't know all the causes of these things. Like it's like the things that we don't know. It's going to be really interesting and I've been saying this for a while, in like 20 years, when we know all of this stuff, we have all the answers, and we look back at like these times and be like, man, we did so many stupid things, like the hand sanitizer didn't even work, and I'm using that as an example. I don't know, I mean, obviously it works, but like, you know, it's like, oh man, and we thought that this was the way to do it, and this is how it's actually passed, and like, you know, because I have friends who are in the science world and are in healthcare and are in these things and are doctors, and like, even my doctor, when I told her about the fact that I had coronavirus or had it, she was like, you know, here's the thing, like, this symptom you're experiencing like 3 months later, like, it could be a post-COVID thing, but we just don't know, you know, like, and it's going to be interesting in a couple years when like the research is done and the studies are done and these things, like, I mean, the vaccine's been on its way for a while because, you know, it's a SARS mutation. So like SARS, that was 10 years ago in China? It wasn't super recent. So like people are saying, oh, like the vaccine, it's not, I don't trust it. I'm like, I do. And I know people who are working on it in like the labs creating it, and they're like, trust me, like this wouldn't, they're rushing its distribution. They're not rushing the production of it, as far as I know. And that's what I've been told by the people who are like in that world, you know what I mean? But it's funny because, like, you know, it's just gonna be really interesting when we actually know everything and we're all vaccinated and like no one's worried about it, and like we're no longer wearing masks and we're no longer socially distancing, like, you know. And I think that this is something that's just really interesting, that our group of people who are in these age groups and age generations, it's like we're experiencing something that like hasn't really happened to society since like what, 1918? You know, yeah, and it's really interesting to be a part of it, but it doesn't mean it makes it any easier. You know, but it's going to be really, I think it's like, as a person who loves science and like is a math science brain kid, like I look at this and I'm like, man, but like how cool is it going to be in 10 years when we know everything? You know, like, and I know that, like, and I really hope that no one thinks that I'm making light of a terrible situation. Like, I do understand that this is very serious. But from a science perspective, it's fascinating. And like, I really do hope that if anyone is listening and has someone who has been affected negatively from this, like, I hope that they're okay. I hope that they get better. I hope that you know, they're not in the hospital. Like, you know, I really do want nothing but goodness and kindness for all of the humanity and people I know. And so, like, I just want to preface that, like, I make jokes, but like I'm not being callous or crude. You know what I mean? Or not.
I don't take it as such. I think you might have just tapped into. Yeah, but the way it comes across as what you're saying, you know, I would be like, oh, how could you? But it doesn't even come across as that.
Okay, cool.
The scientist actor,
right?
You know, which one are you gonna be? You know, I'm a
funny story. I was such a science nerd when I was a kid. I thought I was like, so when I grow up, I'm either going to be an actor or a marine biologist. Like two things that could not be less similar.
Yeah.
Like, what? I don't know. And I still, like, to this day, like, it's so funny. I've recently, like, been looking at the things I want from my life and the things that are important to me and the things that I find interesting and creative. And I'm like, maybe I'll go to nursing school. Cause like, I always like science and I always like these things. And my family, I mean, like, this is going to sound like such a stereotype, but like, it's true. My family is, you know, Jewish, and they're like, yeah, but you make such a good doctor. You know,
that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, go for the top echelon.
Well, the problem with that is, because I went to a conservatory. Like, my bachelor's is a bachelor's of fine arts. I would probably have to like start all over. And if I had made a decision like this when I was in my 20s, that's one thing. But like, I'm 34. I eventually want to, you know, be a mother and hopefully find my person and get married, and that'll be great. But like, I don't want to be pregnant and in med school. Like, years in school. So it's like, oh, cool. So I'm having my first kid, and I'm taking the MCATs. Like, I'm not going to freaking do that. So I was looking at other options, and I have friends who are doctors, and one of them was like, you should, like, be a PA, which is a physician's assistant, because it's kind of like being a doctor, except, like, the hours are a little bit more structured, and you make a good amount of money. But it's more like a 9 to 5, or at least this is what I've been told by people. Like, I'm sure that I'm sure that you could be a PA at a hospital and work crazy hours. I'm sure there's an exception for everything. But what they said, they were like, yeah, you can finish your nursing degree in like 2 years and then go to PA school. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I could. Like, this is like, and then I'd be let's say I'd be done by 38, 39, and then I'd still be working, and hopefully by then moving along the ways of figuring out how to become a mother at that point, because I looked at it and I was like, I'm not going to go to med school. I'm 34. I'll be going to med school with 20-year-olds. No, man, I'm not doing that. I'm too old for that. Missed that boat.
You said this whole thing, and in between, I just envisioned you taking the test, and then you're at your last question. You're like, I'm done. You go hand it in, and my water broke.
Right? Seriously.
And then it's like the baby, you deliver, and then all of a sudden, did I pass? It's a boy. Did I pass?
It's
the doctor, did I pass? Of course you did. Yeah,
You failed, but you have a beautiful baby boy.
Yeah, your husband comes running in. You passed. And everyone's, hey! And they hold up the baby high. Hey!
We're putting the pencil to the paper, right?
And the baby's even chuckling, even though it's still a baby. Yay! You passed!
Good for you! I'm still done with you studying.
I passed. And then he just urinates, and it goes into this bridge, and it hits somebody.
Oh gosh!
It's celebratory.
You goof.
It's celebratory. Oh.
Oh my goodness. Well,
she's a doctor. She's a doctor, but she's an actress. At night, she saves lives.
We have to get that crazy Hollywood announcer voice, though. It's
night.
She's an actor, but at night she fights crime. I don't know.
Oh my God, Vin Diesel's having a stroke. Don't worry, I'll save him.
Oh my gosh.
Give him mouth to mouth.
Don't worry, I'm a doctor.
I'm a doctor. You saved my life, Doc. You don't understand.
Oh my gosh. You are so bad.
Now I can do Fast and Furious 15 because of you.
Oh my God.
They cut to Fast and Furious, and you're part of the scene, jumping on something. Come on, Doc, let's go. On top of a helicopter with John Cena behind you, hoisting you to Vin Diesel. Tyrese is screaming, no, I don't think she's going to make it.
Oh my God.
No, you're crazy. What happened to the Doc? Come out with dirt on your face, everything is going to be all right. My mind sometimes.
I mean, it means that you have an entertaining life.
I try, man. I entertain myself and others as much as I can.
Amen, my friend. Me too. I'd much rather make people laugh than,
So, I don't even know, how do we end this thing?
I don't know.
Conversation.
Was this the wrap-up of the pandemic? Was this the wrap-up? What was I know we went so off-topic for so long that, who knows what this episode is exactly about, and we can do another episode that's a little bit more geared towards whatever we were initially trying to do. But yeah, what do you think we need to discuss before we let our listeners go back to their lovely lives?
It basically, I've been saying this since it kind of when it got to the summer, and I've said it before in this episode, it was basically a reboot.
Yeah.
And I will always say this to people. I said the reboot was needed because it reminds me of, you might have seen a scene in the movie where somebody comes up with a good idea and the boss shoots it down, and then they end up having to go with that idea anyway.
Right.
So all these things that were in motion that people were like, no, we're not going to do it. Now they're forced to do this, like the whole thing with streaming. I was always like, how come they just don't do streaming and theatrical at the same time? They were, playing around with it, and now this has opened that window to, and that's a whole other episode that I can really get into, because I already predict that there's money and stuff like that they're not talking about. But
of course,
I'm in agreement with what you're saying. Things are, they're getting better. Everything's going to level out, and things will, slowly be back to. I mean, look, I've already seen things at a, place of normalcy, just that we had masks on, but people were still doing the same things.
Yeah, I agree.
So, it's getting there. We're back, and things will, be back to normal. And as far as I'm concerned, we can leave it at that.
Well, I hope that everyone enjoyed listening and to our ramblings and I hope that I wasn't on my soapbox too often. But I guess I have a lot to say.
No, this is just what I was looking for.
Cool.
So, it's gonna, someone put it like this. Everyone's not gonna like everything. And we're really looking for those that like listening to what we're doing, no matter if it's this year, next year, whatever. I do little stuff for fun, so I don't go, oh, we got 8 million views, and it's fun. It's a time capsule. That's how I look at it. It's a time capsule, of expression.
Yeah.
So, on that note, Miss Amelia, I'm going to peace you out, bid you adieu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk to you soon, where we destroy the Mandalorian.
Okay, here we go.
Or something else, So, are you watching Cobra Kai, or no? That's not your
No, I'm not. I've heard it's good.
Okay. Yeah,
but
it's good. It's good. But we'll leave it at that. All right. I shall talk to you soon. Thanks again.
Of course.
And for you people out there, thanks again for listening. The present, the past, and the future. We are out of here. So long.
All right. Have a good rest of your day, y'all.